arrived, she greeted me with, "I'm so excited to talk about data." Jess is an analytics pro who has worked with some of the world's largest media companies to drive revenue and meet business goals using paid and organic social media tactics. Basically, she knows a lot about how to use data to engage and increase a brand's audience. Jess has worked with BBC, The Economist, Hulu, AMC, Viacom, Condé Nast, Bloomberg, Time Inc., Spotify for Brands, Microsoft, Barnes & Noble, and more. And she's currently an award-winning marketer for NS1. I'm thrilled that Jess is spending time with us here today and tomorrow to share more than just how to use social media, but how to create a social media strategy that will have the greatest impact for our communities. Please join me in welcoming Jess Bahr.
Hello. I am excited to be here, as Gina said. Let me pop up my presentation. So, quick show of hands. Who here spends time looking at the analytics for your social media or marketing programs? Oh, fantastic. Everyone, essentially. All right. Oops. There we go. That's me. I think I have the same cardigan on, just about. So, as Gina said, I've spent most of my career working with large publishers, media companies, brands, running paid social campaigns with them, and then also helping them develop a really, I call it, holistic approach to their social and digital marketing that's rooted in data. So today, we're going to talk about why data, what to track, how to track it, and then how to make it actionable. The goal is that everyone leaves feeling confident that they know how to leverage data to reach the right audience at the right time with the right content. I'll also be doing a workshop tomorrow if you guys want to come and get really hands-on and talk one-on-one about this stuff too. So to set the tone though, I want to cover a couple terms that we're going to talk about to make sure we're on the same page. So you're going to hear me talk about rates today. Conversion rate, engagement rate, rate. Rates, when you talk about your own content, are always the thing over impressions or number of times that content was seen. Sometimes, if you're looking at other tools like Econosquare to look at your competitors' data, they'll show you an engagement rate for a competitor on social. That's usually actually the whatever metric it is over number of fans that they have. So sometimes your rates aren't what they appear. Usually they'll offer definitions. When I talk about conversions, that is anything that really tips the needle for your audience. So if you're trying to get people to come to a spaghetti dinner, that conversion could be them actually showing up or them opting in yes to the RSVP for it. And then target audience, which is who you're trying to talk to. With the slides after they're distributed, there'll also be a marketing analytics glossary that has some more definitions on it. So there are two tenets of marketing analytics that drive my entire life. One is data collected without a purpose is just hoarding numbers. You got a lot of numbers, but what are you doing with it? It's just sitting there getting dusty, right? The real value of data comes when you're, sorry, I don't stay by the mic. I'm used to walking around, so I might stroll off, but I'll try and get back. The real value of data comes when you're able to leverage it to make actionable things to drive your strategy forward. So our goal is not just to collect data, but to collect the right data and make sure we're making it actionable. So why does data matter? Data is your friend. This is Data from Star Trek. If you guys aren't familiar, this is his pet cat named Spot. And he was trying to learn more human emotions. But data is our friend. It can seem kind of scary at times. It can seem overwhelming and hard, but it really is our friend. Data is a detective that is able to help unearth the real story of what's going on. There's a lot of times when human emotion is involved, especially if you've spent time producing content that you're really proud of. It might not be the best thing for that audience you're serving it to. And emotion can often kind of cloud how we're reading things. So data is a great detective to unearth the actual story of what's going on, and then to leverage that to light the path forward and highlight where you might be going and where some opportunities to improve are. Data is also a great tool to drive alignment, especially if you have an organization where people are very passionate about what they're doing, because sometimes it might not be the best thing to put on certain platforms or at the best time. So data can be this kind of unbiased tool that you can all leverage or rally around on it. So we know data is important, at least I hope everyone believes data is important. So what should you track? Because there's a lot of options out there. I always recommend making sure you're tracking the right things for you. So Grumpy Cat, at the time of her passing earlier this year, had 2.7 million followers. That's a ton of people following this cute, adorable little cat. Is followers the most important metric, though? Not necessarily, and a lot of people do get caught on followers, so it's an easy to give vanity metrics as an example. You have this e-commerce brand where they have over 500,000 subscribers on Instagram, fans, and that looks super, super impressive. But if you're an e-commerce company, your goal is to sell products, and if you look at their post, they have 100 to 200 likes on each post, which means they're getting even fewer clicks. So if you're an e-commerce company and you have 500,000 followers on Instagram, but you can't activate them to actually buy your products, that's a failure. You want to think about what are the actual metrics that matter that are going to tell us we're pushing the needle forward. Grumpy Cat, with her 2.7 million followers, that works out well because she's actually selling her, excuse me, selling her image essentially. Oh, sorry. Ran out of voice sooner than I thought. She's selling her image. So Grumpy Cat is estimated to be worth over $100 million in brand deals because she's just selling her image. So her having a huge fan base makes sense. It might not make sense to everyone. That's the last cat of the presentation. As a note. So what really matters to you? I challenge you to think about the thing that is most important overall within what you're doing, within your organization, and then tie your social media back to it. So an example is if your goal is to raise money for, let's say, like a mission trip or raise money for some fundraiser, your key social metrics behind that could be your click-through rate on posts that are driving back to your fundraising page. Or if you're using Facebook fundraising, the amount of money that you're getting from each fundraiser that you do, or the number of people who are initiating them, or average value. You really want to think about your social media metrics along with what your actual accomplishing goals and value off of social. Another example, if you're having a special event, your key metric on social could be the number of people who've RSVP'd yes on the invite to it. It could be the number of people who have shared pictures from the event afterwards on social media, the number of people talking about it. So really think about how it ties back together to the overall thing. Excuse me. It's always, I always recommend to stay away from the high-level vanity metrics, especially if you have smaller audiences you could be reaching. So I'm from a town of 5,000 people. Our church will never have 20,000 followers on Facebook. There's just not that many people, but it doesn't mean they're not successful. I also encourage you to think about baseline social media metrics in the same way. So instead of thinking about followers, on the internal side, think about again what those larger goals are and align your baseline metrics to that. So an example could be, if you're using Facebook fundraising, how much you're raising each month on Facebook, or how much you're raising in each transaction, and really ladder these back up. And then the goal with the baseline metrics is to track them over time. External ones, instead of comparing yourself to a competitor, so like the Pope has a lot of followers, don't benchmark against the Pope, he has way too many, but look at other accounts that are similar in size to your organization that are trying to reach the same audience, and look at what they're doing to see how you're fitting in the industry. It's really hard to find industry benchmarks. They're often wrong. It's just very difficult to do, and the companies who do them tend to only do them for large industries as a whole. So I'll give you like an entertainment one. So I always recommend building your own benchmarks with it. So we understand data is important. We've talked about the metrics that's important to grab. Where do you track them and how do you track them? This may be surprising, but I use Google Sheets and Excel for everything, which can seem like maybe like a little old school type of way to do it, but a lot of the options out here for tracking are expensive and don't do as well as Google Sheets does. Google Data Studio is also a great tool. It's free through Google, and it essentially plugs in your data sources and helps you visualize them. From the data itself, a lot of times going into Facebook and looking through insights and digging into that and your Instagram analytics, Iconosquare is a great app for that to help with it because Instagram is a little bit limited. Google Analytics is also important to include. So you have at the top of it your social media analytics from the companies that your platforms you're using, which is more awareness focused. But what really matters, what are people doing off social? So I have Google Analytics up here because a lot of People have it for their site. It's probably the most standard option. It's free. It's also great. It's just the most robust platform possible. And so you want to make sure you're looking at how your social referral traffic is behaving on your site and what they're doing. If for you guys, having traffic to your site and getting them on your newsletter and signups is important to you. And then I have Facebook fundraiser up here too. If that is a goal of something that you're using, you want to make sure that you're looking at that and that you're looking at it over time. So what I do, I take my data regularly out of these platforms, and then I'll put them into my Google Sheets doc where I'm tracking it over time. The key with benchmarking is you want to be having it broken down by time and potentially by post also, so you can understand what your averages are and you can then use it to project into the future. The other benefit with benchmarking is it allows you to help dive in and see when something goes weird. So if your average, let's say that your average donation amount through Facebook is $20 a person, and then all of a sudden you have one for $500, whoa, where'd that come from? Let's dive in. But if you don't have your benchmark set, it can be a lot harder to see when you have an anomaly like that. So I have two examples up here. Does anyone do you guys spend time in your Facebook analytics looking at what's going on? Yeah. Awesome. Excuse me. I didn't anticipate my throat getting dry, so I'm glad Gina poured me water. In the beginning, I was like, I don't need it. So you'll see the top is actually from Facebook, and it's post-reach, and where you have these dips down, what you want to do when you benchmark is then start digging in. A lot of times I see trends like this on weekends, especially for companies where maybe your activity is more during the week. You may find that there are certain days that don't do quite as well. I had a client once where Mondays were just horrible, and we couldn't figure out why. We started asking people, and their Mondays they were swamped with like checking emails from the weekend, so there's less active on those pages. But benchmarking allows you to start seeing the anomalies, so we can start identifying, oh, there's a huge spike here. What is that from? Let's start digging in. I view benchmarking and this part of analytics as almost being able to shed light into like a large pond to start looking at where your rocks are under. It helps surface some things that you might not otherwise see. And then from there, we want to make it actionable. So we have our data collected, we're able to analyze it and dive in, and then one of the best ways to make it actionable is through A/B and multivariate testing. Is anyone currently testing content where you put out a couple different iterations? We have a couple hands. Get ready for a great tool, because this can be such a powerful way. So A/B testing is when you have two or more, they'll call it A/B or ABN. You have two or more options of the same variable. So in this example, we have a banner on the top for the sale, and on the left is red, the right is blue. We're going to test the different colors with it. Multivariate, you're testing different variables for different components. So we're not just testing the top banner between red and blue, but we're also going to test putting a banner midway down the page to see how it impacts our overall conversions. Some other terms that you may hear around this is statistical significance, which sounds like a very nerdy term, but essentially it means how confident are you that the results that you saw can be repeated? Or is it just an anomaly? And then you have your null and your alternate, which is what you're starting with, your current state, and the new state that you're testing. And then lift is the change between them. So your lift is usually a percentage. So I'm going to show you guys an example. If I'm a website and my traffic comes in, I'm going to split my traffic evenly between the red and the blue option, and then I'm going to measure what happens. In this example, I had 1,000 visitors to both. So the red option had 120 people that actually bought, and the blue had 210, which means I have a 73% lift. What that means is people who see the blue option are 73% more likely to actually convert and to buy the product. The challenge with A/B multivariate testing is traditionally it requires a lot of data. To get there, it requires a lot of high traffic, which can be a challenge. So I'm going to talk about how you guys can apply this thing that people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing, that you guys can apply without needing as much with it. A few elements of a good test. One is you want to start with a hypothesis in mind. So back in a couple slides ago, we were looking at that reach by day data, and we saw there were some spikes and there were some dips. So let's say we saw that on one of those spike days, we had shared a video that, on a post, we shared a video that was featuring some employees talking about why they loved what they were doing and featured products. And usually we just showed pictures. So our test could be that sharing videos on our feed has a higher engagement than showing pictures. It's important, though, to define what you're testing against in the beginning, so you go in with a goal in mind. If you aren't sure what to test for, you need to go back and dig into the data. And tomorrow in the workshop, we're going to do like hands-on digging in and learning where insights are and how to read stuff. So our test is videos versus images. We want to define the success metric. So we could say that if I see any lift in engagement at all, I'm going to say that it's a success. Even if maybe I see more comments but not more likes, as long as it's overall engagement, we're good, it's a success. You want to use distinct elements when doing this. So in our example, a video and a photo are pretty different. If you did have pictures, you could have a picture of one person versus maybe a picture of like your entire audience that's at something. We want to make sure it's something distinct where it's not super close, where it's just similar pictures and you have to kind of squint to see a difference. The more distinct the images are, or the things you're testing are, the easier it'll be to see a change between them. Now, Google did famously test 42 different shades of blue on their google.com homepage. I don't know if anyone ever remembers seeing different shades of blue. They're all very close. I don't think anyone noticed it. But they spent months doing it. That's insane. It's so much time and so much traffic required for it, and it's such a very niche thing. I recommend trying to start with more broad items and then see what happens. And if you find videos do better, great. Now you know videos do. Start testing within videos. How can we change them to do better? Can we get more people in front of the camera? Maybe we should go outside. Let's start making some changes, but start big, narrow in. And the last element of a good test is trying to control other variables. This is the hardest one. So traditionally in A/B and multivariate testing, a brand will run the test for 2 weeks because then you're going to account for any like Monday through Friday versus Saturday, Sunday fluctuations. It can usually account for any AM, PM. It's a lot of time, but you want to try and control other variables. So this is essentially, and we'll share the slides, the same thing I ran through with how you set it up. For splitting your audience, you would generally use a tool like Optimizely for it. Now, the challenge on social media becomes that you can't control your audience. If we could control who saw our post, I think we would all have a lot easier job. But you can't. There's an algorithm, right? So we're going to talk about how that changes with it. But we set up your audience. You determine the time that it needs to run. Generally, the time is enough data to reach significance. And then run your campaign. Take a look at how it did, see your winners, and then iterate and keep iterating on the results. But so what do you do when you can't control your audience on social media? How do we run tests if we can't split it properly? And what do we do if we don't have enough data to really get there? Well, you guys are actually probably already doing split testing and you might not even realize it. So, question for everyone. Instagram. What do you think performs better, photos or videos? Photos? Video? Okay, raise your hand if you vote photo. Quite a majority. Raise your hand if you vote video. Also, I feel like a majority. Okay, we're gonna call it a split. Who knows? If only we had a way to tell. So I was doing some digging. I call these lo-fi tests, and I found Fresh Life. And I noticed on their feed, I keep seeing the situation where there's a picture and there's a video, and the video and picture are clearly from the exact same event. So here you have the pastor, the gentleman on the right preaching, and then on the left is a video of him, and then text of what he's saying over the video. Which one do you, by show of hands, who thinks the photo outperformed the video? Ooh, that's like no one. Oh, well, we got some. Who thinks the video outperformed the photo? Well, the photo did better. Right? We all hear, you look at social media news, everyone talks about video crushing it. Is it? I don't know. Now I have a data point saying that photos, and it's not a drastic difference. It's 623 likes versus 672. Not huge, but let's try it again, because I found a ton of these on their Instagram feed. So, same gentleman with a sledgehammer. I don't know why. It didn't talk about it, but he's got a sledgehammer. And then a video, same talk, text over it. Which one do you guys think did better? Photo over video? Raise your hand if you think the photo did better. Video over photo? You guys are still wrong. And you're even more wrong. So 905 versus 502. So now it's even a bigger spread. All right, let's try it again. So we have a different guy this time, and he also still has a sledgehammer. He's hammering a nail into a piece of wood. I didn't quite follow, but he is. So, and this you'll see is actually a carousel, so it's a couple pictures. So now I have introduced another variable in here that was not controlled for, which is not the best, but it's social media. You know, not everything's perfect. Okay, who thinks the photo did better than the video? Okay, one more. Who thinks the video did better? The photo. So the thing is, conventional knowledge, though, tells us, they always say, like, videos, do videos on social media, videos do better, video. We look at the data, though, and the data is telling us that photos are doing better. We would have never found this if it wasn't for detective data coming in with it. So you'll also notice that I showed you 3 examples. Every week, they share a picture and a video. And they're always next to each other. It's always the photo first, the video second, and they're usually a couple hours apart. So what they're doing by sharing it so often in that set is they're starting to build up what you would get from 2 weeks of straight testing that you don't get because it's social media. So they're not just doing it once, declaring a winner, doing it twice, declaring a winner. They're doing it over and over again. They're trying to, I think, account for some of, I don't know if they realize they're doing this, but they're accounting for some of that also variation that might get from sharing it on a Sunday versus a Monday versus a Tuesday and sharing in the morning and afternoon. So everyone in here can be a data scientist and go do an A/B test on your own social content. You can go do this today. Maybe not all today. You need other days also for your data. But you can go start this and think about, in order to have enough data for it, I'm not just going to share it once, but I'm going to repeat this a couple times, and I'm going to repeat it different times during the day, different days of the week to see how it works. And it's a super easy way to get started. And then on your spreadsheet, you put your results in so you can track it over time. So in summary, like, what do you do when you don't have enough data? Don't let data hold you hostage. It's another data. You can't have enough data pictures in a data presentation, but data's our friend. Right? Data shouldn't hold us hostage. Data should help empower us to do better with what we have than restricting us. So even if it isn't perfect and you don't feel like you have enough data to do something, give it a try and see what you have. And don't be afraid that you don't have enough out there for it. Data's your friend, guys. So back to how we set up our tests with only little data. We have our initial steps where we'd have our splitting our audience traffic, and we would have determining the time the campaign should run. What we want to do is pick your variable to test. Pick photos versus videos. Just because photos are crushing it for this church does not mean that it's what's going to work for your audience. They can respond to something entirely different. So pick what you're testing, and then define what your success is. What are you trying to accomplish, and what does it mean for it to be a good test and for a variant to be a winner? And then determine how your audience is going to see each version. So don't worry, as much about splitting the audience, but decide, I know that in order for me to effectively test this, I'm going to share it once a week for the next 3 weeks. Or I'm going to share this type of setup if it's, let's say you're testing black and white photos versus color photos. I'm going to do every day, I'm going to share one of each. Every day might be a bit much for your audience, but pick that cadence so that you are saying from the get-go how you're going to do it. And then determine how often they're going to see the variable. So one day a week, I'm going to share a black and white photo, and one day I'm going to share a color photo. And I'm going to make sure that over the course of the next 2 months that the color photo and the black and white photo, they're served every day of the week, just to see if there's an anomaly on it. And then run your campaign, and then analyze your data, and then iterate. And you may find that there isn't a strong lift. If you don't have any difference between the two, it just means there's something else that's going to be more impactful on it. Test everything. You never know what'll happen. I think all of us, I expected video to win for sure. Just as a note on the Instagram, I definitely thought video would win. I was shocked also. So in summary, Align your metrics to what matter for you. Don't try and be grumpy cat. Don't try and be the Pope. Think about what is actually going to push your business forward. I say business, your organization forward. And align your social media metrics to ladder back up to that. Benchmark so you can track how you're doing over time. And if there's any changes, it'll be a lot easier to see when there's an anomaly. Analyze your data so you can find opportunities to improve and what some of those spikes might be. And then design an ABN or a multivariate test. You know, be a data scientist, go do it. You guys are all capable now, you know all the framework for it. And see what happens and find ways to make it better. If you need more, I am doing a workshop tomorrow where we're gonna dive in and look at all of this, live accounts that are active on my computer, dive in, all of your questions, happy to field. I also do free mentoring through growthmentor.com, which you can sign up for. And I will be around for the next few days. So if you guys have any questions also after this, or anytime if you see me around the hotel, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to talk about this 24/7. It is, I can talk about it in my sleep. So any questions you guys have, I'm happy to answer and try to help you guys as much as I can with this. Are there any specific questions now? Yes. Oh, there's a microphone? Oh, there's a mic coming. Sorry, I jumped the gun on calling out. I got excited.
I am curious, do you do mentoring for women of all ages?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Too? Okay.
I have a pretty vast background with the content I've worked with, and so I work with everything from pre-revenue startups and like kids who are in high school who have ideas for businesses and are doing business competitions to well-funded companies that need a fresh set of eyes. Yeah? Anyone? Oh, we have one over here.
What have you found when you're analyzing your audiences? Is the audience on Facebook, I would think, would be different than the audience on Instagram?
Yes.
Just because of generations. For example, our audience on Facebook, our sisters were mainly teachers in our community. So it's a lot of former students who are looking for their former teachers. We don't really have a presence on Instagram because we wouldn't have the same audience. So what has been your experience?
Yeah, they tend to be different. And what I recommend, if you're gonna start dabbling, look at your analytics and see how they're engaging. A lot of times I will literally just go through and I'll look at who's following. Because sometimes there might not be enough data on the analytics side to really get insights from it. But for many companies and many organizations, what they find is your Facebook audience is different, which means that they want different content and they want to consume it differently. So if you know on Facebook, a lot of your fans are former students who are looking for their teachers, they might respond really well to personal content about what's going on in their life. So if you're sharing, let's say, a fundraiser, you would want the teachers to talk about like their personal experience or like their trip, or they're really making it a personal story, because if it's their students, that's what they want to engage in. Versus Instagram is very visual. Instagram may be more of something where you're just showing pictures of events and pictures from the community and very more visual focused versus Facebook. Most places you have to have, it's almost best practice to always have a different content strategy to customize on the audience that's there. Yeah, that's not uncommon at all. And the audience, if you're on Facebook too, usually you want to consume more personal information. Advertising on Facebook tends to be difficult because people don't want to be interrupted. And so you almost have to make it more personal versus other platforms where you almost expect to see it. So yeah, definitely lean into that if you know that if they have a personal connection, lean into the content from the people themselves. Yeah.
So when I think about conversions, I think of make a donation, subscribe to my newsletter, buy a ticket to an event. Can you come up with any others that are less sales oriented? That's a really hard sell.
Yeah, a newsletter would be my first thought, but you said that. Because it's more focusing on people. If there's anything subscription, so a lot of times what you really want is you want to know who they are instead of being just this anonymous traffic. So if there's other ways for them to expose their like identity and opt into being marketed to, it sounds very, very cold, in the sense of saying opting in to be marketed to, but if they, those are usually the big ones. I've done it before too, where I've set up for, it's still kind of a newsletter, like opting in for more information. But you could actually define whatever conversion you want. So if you're running a campaign and you know that you don't necessarily want people to feel like they're being sold to, let's say it's a dinner coming up and there's no sign up for it, but it's an information, you could have your conversion be viewing the landing page. You're losing a little bit of data because you don't know who it is. It's a trade-off. But you can always set your conversion point to be, I would say, make it some action that's like a step beyond just viewing a post though. So that you can tell that they've taken that extra step of intent to show they're actually engaged with it. I always like also to set conversion points throughout the whole funnel. So even if someone comes to your landing page for the newsletter, that could be a conversion step. And then you can measure how many people come to the landing page that actually sign up for it. Yeah, it's always a little I feel like sometimes it's like dehumanizing to talk about people in sense of marketing and trying to sell to them. So it can be another way to make it a little softer. Yeah. I pixel everything though. Everything's a conversion. You just have to know which ones you're measuring. I think there are a couple other,
When do you recommend recording the stats on your social media, since the numbers on a post may change over the days and weeks in the life of that post?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Usually on like Facebook, Instagram, your posts, so Facebook, I think the average is 4 hours still, where it's not living too long, and Instagram sometimes a day and a half. If you look at tools like Iconosquare or even Audience for Twitter, they'll actually show you from the time a post is published, when is your engagement coming in. So I have an Instagram about my lifting because I do powerlifting. And I'll find sometimes when I publish a post, all of a sudden 3 days later, I'm getting a ton of likes on it because it made it to the Discover feed. So it got an extra kind of breath. So I'll go and I'll look and see where the time is. Usually, the point I'm getting at with this is, if you see something that's gaining traction 2 or 3 days later, go and look, because that's not common. I always like to look at stuff the day it's published, then like a couple days later, to see if something else came in. But look at it on the overall level too, weekly. Is what I recommend. A lot of my marketing coordinators that come in, or people that I'm mentoring when they're in the marketing field, I'll always recommend Monday morning, check all of your metrics, check all of your data too. Yeah. It would be great too if the platforms actually gave us impressions per post per day. A lot of them, it takes a little bit of effort to dive into it. Yeah. And shares actually can always cause that to increase too afterwards. We have. So here's the tricky part. And the definition of an impression changes between platforms. So in theory, the simplest way is it showed up in someone's feed. Impressions also is not a unique number. So if you saw it twice, you have 2 impressions. So Twitter, for example, will say it has to be 80% in view for over 2 seconds. So it can't be something you quickly scrolled by. Snapchat, if it's seen for like, if it's 100% in view, it's an impression. It doesn't matter as much. Facebook is like 85% in the screen, and it has to be for over, I think, a second. So they vary a little bit. It can get a bit tricky, but essentially an impression is any time it's seen by anyone. If you have reach is your unique number of people who saw it. Yeah, so it can get a bit sometimes looking weird when you have a super high number of impressions, but you know that you have a small fan base, and like what happened, they probably saw it a ton of times. So especially if there's a lot of comments on it, it can keep resurfacing within it. Yeah. Oh, we have in the back.
So I'm just curious about the example you gave of the Instagram, the video versus the photo.
Yes.
Did you say that they were placed side by side and the photo was first and the video was second?
So whenever I saw them, It was, let me go back to it. So you can see they would share the photo first and the video second.
I guess I'm just wondering if people click on the photo because they see that and they like it, and they maybe just don't get to the video.
It could be. The algorithm, the way that it's served is kind of funky. What they would want to do as the next step is test the reverse order.
Right, that's what I would do.
Yep, because it could be.
Just curious.
Yeah, because it could be either way. Yeah. That's a great observation. That'd be a great thing for them to test next. All right. If anyone else wants to chat, I'll be around, and come to my workshop tomorrow. Let's talk more data. Yeah. Thank you.